This is the RV Advisor Podcast with your host, Tom Alexander. Get all the latest information, trends, advice from experts, stories from the road, and more in the world of recreational vehicles. Now, here's Tom.
Welcome to the RV Advisor Podcast. My name is Tom Alexander, and today we have the founder of the absolutely huge website, RV Travel, Chuck Woodbury. Chuck, of course, newsletters, blogs, books, you name it. Chuck Woodbury is the man when it comes to RV travel, and that's, of course, the name of his website. Chuck, how are you?
I'm good, Tom. How are you?
Doing great. And you know, I'll tell you, looking at everything you do is I swear there has to be 3 or 4 of you somewhere. How do you do it all?
I've got helpers. We have a small staff, and I've been doing this for a long time, and you figure out a few shortcuts along the way, but it all gets done. We've got a pretty good system.
When did RV Travel start, the website?
Well, RV Travel started about 20 years ago.
Uh-huh.
I'd been publishing on the road, a traditional, I called it an on-the-road newspaper for about 15 years before that, called Out West. I traveled around the West in a motorhome and wrote stories about interesting people and places. And in doing so, I got to know all about RVs. I wasn't writing about RVing. But so when the web came along, I knew that RV, the subject matter was going to be, it was going to be there and it was going to be big. So I jumped in before most other people. Mm-hmm. And so about 20 years. It's been, it's gone fast.
Yeah, and books you'd mentioned. You've got a book called The Best from Out West and the ABCs of RVing. Mm-hmm. It's the kind of thing that I think when you sit down to compose these chapters and, you think about all the stuff that you've experienced, mm-hmm. How hard is that for you to sort of take those ideas, the life you've lived, and put it down on mm-hmm. the page and make it so accessible for people?
Well, it's funny. I've just recently been realizing that one of the things that I have is years and years of seeing how this whole RV thing has evolved. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes it drives me crazy trying to put all the ideas together and make sense of it. RVing today is not what it was like 25, 30 years ago. Imagine before the Internet, people could go camp anywhere. They didn't care if they had or before cell phones. We didn't care, and RVs were much more primitive, and now they're really homes on wheels, and everybody wants Internet and Wi-Fi, and there are so many topics, and that for me, having been living and breathing this for so long, I could use a staff of 10 and never get to all the ideas and articles that I think need to be put out there for veteran RVers or beginners, which, Gigi is heavily involved in.
Yeah. And, you're based north of Seattle. Your travels, I'm assuming, are mm-hmm. all over the place. But I find a lot of the folks that I speak with, they tend to stay mm-hmm. west of the Mississippi. Is that the case for you?
Well, I think probably about 40% of our readers are east of the Mississippi. But the West is really an amazing place. I mean, amazing place to travel with an RV. It's so open. It's so different than the East. I've traveled in the East. It's many times with an RV, and it's more congested. You don't have those huge, vast desert lands and forests, and the beauty, the magnificence of the Grand Canyon and the southern Utah, the Red Rock Country, and the Pacific Northwest. It's a magnificent place to travel, and that's why so many people travel here or want to come here.
Yeah. When you are on the road, do you really mm-hmm. kind of look and plan ahead a lot, or do you sometimes just say, you know what, let's just see where we go?
People used to ask me years ago, what's your biggest decision of the day? And I'd say, my biggest decision is whether I'm going to turn left or right out of the campground. I really went wherever it looked more interesting, wherever there was more promise of something that was different or where I hadn't been before. Nowadays, because of the large number of sales and of RVs and so many people, reservations are very often required, and it can be really challenging to find a place. And I find that spontaneous travel is much harder today than it used to be. And frankly, when I travel now, I make sure, generally speaking, that I have something lined up ahead of time in the tourist season. Off season, it's still pretty much go where you want.
There's more in a moment.
The most experienced RV traveler knows it's important to expect the unexpected. Trust the RV Advisor Roadside Assistance Plan, starting at just $99 per year. It's the industry's most affordable plan and offers the most value compared to competitors, covering RVs, towed vehicles, personal vehicles, horse trailers, bike trailers, and more. Visit the RVadvisor.com or call 833-229-0911. The RV Advisor Roadside Assistance Plan. Don't hit the road without it. Our guest is Chuck Woodbury. He is the founder of the website RV Travel. And Chuck, when you sit down to write something for the site, and you just said before that there's just so many things that a staff of 10 can't keep up with the ideas. What excites you the most in terms of writing? What do you like to write about that just over everything else?
I tend to love to write about offbeat stuff that I see out there, crazy things, world's largest, odd stuff. I love that part. But then I become much more concerned and satisfied in writing about consumer topics these days. People that are stuck with defective motorhomes and can't get them fixed. And I like helping people. That's become a much bigger part of my my time has been devoted to that. Teaching people to buy intelligently. I did post a DVD for the Better Business Bureau, which is available in many libraries, on how to buy a recreational vehicle. That was one way that I got to get my word out. But we try really hard to teach people to RV intelligently. And right now there's so many changes in the RV lifestyle. People living in them by necessity, people, living in luxury resorts, people buying junkers and living on the streets, that there's no end to writing about it. And I like to put the pieces together. That's what I enjoy the most.
How many days a year would you say you're on the road?
Well, until a year ago, I was on for 2 years full time, and then back, bought a house. So I would say that right now I'm probably on about 3 months out of the year.
Yeah.
2 years was oh my gosh, the education I got in 2 years out there was eye-opening. A lot of change since way back when I was going out and without a cell phone, because there were no cell phones, and staying out in free campgrounds because I didn't have enough money to pay for them. Things have just changed so dramatically in the world of RVing and for me.
I'm sure there's a few remote areas that cell reception isn't great. But have you ever found that you've gotten stuck for, an inordinate amount of time, mile-wise, without any kind of cell reception?
I have Verizon, and it's I've tried all the different ones. Sometimes I've traveled with 2 or 3 just on testing, and there are still spots. You get into ravines and stuff out in the west where you can't get something, but it's so much. The coverage is pretty extensive these days, and it's not going to be very much longer before satellites are delivering the service, and it will be everywhere. So it's certainly easier in the east to be everywhere and have cell phone service. In the west, you get out into Wyoming, Montana, places like that, and you're going to have some holes where you're not going to get coverage, but it's good.
We've had a few guests on the show that have talked about the transition, and what they've done is they've left suburbia or wherever they are in a home, in a brick and mortar, and they say, you know what, this is it. We're changing everything up. And they sell their belongings, they sell their home, and off they go onto the road. And at obviously you had that 2-year stretch when you were, it was nothing but the open road for you. And talk a little bit about that transition. What was that like when you said, you know what, I'm just going out to do it?
Well, of course, I'd been traveling for 3 or 4 months at a time since I was in my early 30s, and that's half my life ago. None of this was new to me. Selling the house and going out, it was, it was very comfortable for me. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I could probably spend a couple hours talking about that, but I knew what I was getting into because I've been writing about it, studying it, meeting people, full-timers for years and years. And, of course, the RVs today are so comfortable. It's really what it's about is can you get along with another person in that small space? And if you can, then it can just be an absolutely wonderful life. Certainly the RVs today, even mid-priced ones, are so comfortable. And you have everything. I don't think there's much that you can't have. We even did a story once on bumper gardening, for gardeners. And we did a story that was very popular about this guy that put a little planter on the back of his RV and he grew tomatoes or something. Yeah. So, there's not much you can't do. Some people, it's a dream. It's a fantasy for a lot of people. And when they get out there, it's not what they expect. We're actually doing a story on that in the next couple of days. People should just get a little experience before they sell everything and, rent an RV or buy one and keep the house and decide if it's for them before they cut everything and go. But people love it.
Yeah, you don't want to cut the ties too early. And I guess there probably is some sense of, missing, I don't know, friends, neighbors, family, from a neighborhood. And, how was that? How was that transition?
Well, you miss your people at home. But of course today you're staying in touch with social media. Yeah. You're probably going to swing back around home periodically. And I find that all the people I've met through the years who have friends from years ago who moved to other parts of the country or people I've met while RVing, it's like you go to visit them and you haven't been there for a year and you say, hey, we're in your area, we want to come see you. They get all excited. You go hang out with them for a few days and it's just so much fun. So that part is, I didn't suffer at all because I'm used to this. I've been doing it forever.
Yeah.
I suppose some people that are very socially active at home with grandkids, I think they're the ones that probably have the hardest time. I think especially with people with a lot of family at home, it's tougher for them to break away than it is for people like me that I have one daughter and no grandkids, and my daughter works with me now, so I'm in contact with her. So I don't really have too many roots. It all depends.
Yes, right. It depends on your situation. A little bit about the site and what might be down the line. You've got such a huge fan base, and it's just got to be astounding to think, wow, all these people are coming to this site on a daily basis. You're closing in on 500,000 people a day, visiting the site. That's just phenomenal. What is there, on the radar in terms of, things you'd like to do that you haven't done yet?
Oh, I like to get back over to do some international travel again. For every year I would take a month off and go to Europe or somewhere. I've RV'd in New Zealand. I want to go back down there and do that again. Iceland is an amazing place, and I want to go back there. People are nuts up there about RVing. You'd never think it, but
wow.
Crazy. RVing is big in South Africa. Of course, Australia has a very parallel culture to ours with all the same things going on down there that up here. I kind of will do a little bit more travel. You got my daughter taking over more and more of the chores all the time, so I'm getting basically these days doing some writing about what I want to write about and doing some long-range planning. But the site's going to keep growing, and I think we're going to become more like consumer advocates for RVers to keep them out of trouble, let them know what they're getting into, because buying an RV, you're buying a dream is what you're doing.
Yeah.
And it's a fantasy. It really is. You walk into one of these things, they're beautiful. You go, oh, my goodness, wouldn't this be amazing to go where we want to go? And they fall in love, but they don't really pay attention to what they're buying. And they get stuck with, cheap RVs that look good, but beneath the surface, they're not built so well. And they have to know what they're looking for and avoid financing for 20 years, which in my mind is just crazy. And then if they do it all right and if they can afford it, then it's magnificent. Otherwise, it can go really south on them.
Boy, thank you for all you do. I know that folks, I could just say this on behalf of our listeners, that I know that they appreciate everything you do, the information you get out there, and just the entertainment aspect of it as well. Great stuff to read. And if you haven't visited the RV Travel site, please do. RVTravel.com. Chuck Woodbury, the founder, has been our guest. Chuck, we really appreciate it, and we'd love to have you back on again sometime soon.
Just let me know, Tom, and thank you very much for having me on.
Absolutely. This is the RV Advisor Podcast. I'm Tom Alexander, and we'll see you next time. So long, everybody.
You've been listening to the RV Advisor Podcast with Tom Alexander. This podcast is produced in association with Studio Alpha and Alexander Productions in Miami. Visit thervadvisor.com for more.